And so the road mapping begins here with the discussion. This is the biggest feature that has been a bottleneck and also been talked about the most in the previous years. And we are all very excited to get this over the finish line. So I have the link here on the slide, tinyurl.com/VuFind2022 is the link that we've been using to get to the document, and on that the conference planning document, and in the middle of that document is the road mapping section. I think at this point we're going to do our best to open it up to discussion. It is going to be a little challenging because we don't have the chat functionality on Zoom, but we do have the Q&A, and we do have the Slack, which is linked in the planning document. And everybody who accesses the document should be able to leave comments and type directly into the document. So without further ado, let me pull up that document.
And I should also supplement by saying that anybody who wants to join the panel as a full speaker for the purposes of road mapping, you can raise your hand and I'll try to get you up here. I think there may be a limit to how many people we can fit as panelists, but even if we run out of panel space, we can unmute people in the audience so they can at least talk. And I suspect some of us can sort of step back into the audience if somebody needs to come up and share screen. But my expectation is we'll mostly just be talking. So as long as we can hear each other and get messages around, we should be able to function reasonably well.
Mm-hmm. I see that people are already typing into the other ideas and projects section, which is excellent. Feel free to use all the tools at the disposal here, leaving comments on the side, indenting bullets, doing whatever you need to do to get your ideas and your suggestions and your comments out into the open. Jamie will be watching for people to promote to the panel, and I'm going to give it a few minutes because not only do people are putting their ideas down, there's also a lot of reading suggested here of JIRA tickets and It Takes a Village guidebooks for different structures and things like that. So maybe just like the very successful discussion panel yesterday, maybe give it a few minutes for people to digest and put their ideas forth, and then we can go through it and see how things go, and also move things up into the different releases and when we want to try to.
I can also share that early this morning, I just took a quick look at all of the JIRA tickets currently scheduled for release 9 and noticed that there are a few things that I just realistically don't believe are going to get done in time for 9. So I created a new 10.0 release in JIRA and moved them there, which is why we have next major release and future major release here. And certainly there's freedom to move things back and forth if we determine that we need to do so. But I just wanted to have that foundation there, because at this point, I feel that 9.0 has so much in it. It's really at a state where it's almost releasable. We just have to decide which things we need to polish and when we're done enough to get it out there and then refocus on 10. I guess there's also sort of a question about whether a 9.1 is even going to make any sense at this point, or if we just go straight from 9 to 10. I know we've had that conversation before, and we always end up with the point release mid-year, but we'll see how it all develops. But certainly while we're all here, the things I'm most interested in having rise to the surface are what you need, what you're able to contribute, and how we can organize our work better for all of the reasons that Chris mentioned. It's been an especially challenging year at Villanova just because of the number of huge migration projects we've been working on. It's taken some of our attention away from VuFind, and I think we'll continue to do so for at least the rest of this year. Obviously, I'm still working hard to keep on pull requests and keep things moving, but you're getting 10% of my time or something right now because there's just so much going on. And so I want to make this more scalable so that other people can step up and do things, and we're not a bottleneck. We're just continuing to be supportive. And I certainly also have hope that we will have more capacity in the future, but at times that we don't, that shouldn't stop things from moving along. Another thing that we can certainly do during this conversation is try to pin some milestones on things that aren't currently assigned anywhere. Like I see somebody added the OAuth 2 pull request as a note under next major release. And honestly, I think I've lost track of where that one is. It looks like it has some conflicts that need to be resolved, but I don't know if it's waiting for my review or
Yeah, I added it. It's yeah, there are some CSS conflicts, but I'll handle those. But it's waiting for review, and I put it on the list because we need it, basically.
I will add it to the 9.0 milestone then. And if you just maybe re-request a review from me after the conflicts are resolved, then that will.
I'll just do that.
Perfect.
Okay, so if we have just a minute while everybody's writing, I just wanted to share one information with you that I heard from the Zotero community. Zotero is a citation management platform, and they are going to write a generic so-called translator for VuFind systems. So it should be possible to export metadata from VuFind into Zotero pretty easily and in a pretty generic matter. I don't have that much details about it. I just wanted to mention it in case you are working with Zotero and maybe are interested in this.
Interesting. I thought that we already had pretty good Zotero export through both coins and through Zotero's compatibility with EndNote, but I guess maybe this means they have their own new export format to add to the list.
As far as I understood it, it's more based on the intern view when you have Mark 21 information in there, and they also try to get it out of there because coins and things like that sometimes, or export templates, sometimes they need to be activated by the admin to be able to work, and they're trying to do this just in case they find no other opportunity to export something. So, but I don't know how long it will take until it will be available.
Right. Well, good to know. Well, it seems like things might be quieting down a little bit. Do we want to try to work through some of the things that have been written?
Certainly. I'm trying to get onto Jira so I can pull in tickets or write things down as they come up. But besides that,
So I see that there's a suggestion for a WYSIWYG editor for content pages, which definitely seems like something that should be pretty feasible, especially with VuFind's existing support for Markdown and tools to edit Markdown being fairly prevalent. And I see that Effective Web Work is planning to start work on that. So hopefully we will see a pull request or something eventually. Adding the ability for users to store information about external IDs like ORCID in their user account. I wonder if some kind of generic user attribute system that could be configured to allow arbitrary things might be a solution there, since I suspect many institutions have different kinds of needs for different kinds of user information. I think there was even a mention in one of yesterday's talks about sort of abusing a field in the user table because there was a need to store a value that's not normally stored there. So maybe that having a better solution for that would solve this problem and others as well. And I would think that if we had such a thing, we would not only want to allow some fields to be editable by the user, but we would also want to have ways to automatically populate some of them through the authentication system and attributes. Regarding use of linked open data sets in VuFind, there's been a lot of discussion about that. We had, I believe, a whole community call dedicated to it where we opened a number of Jira tickets about different aspects of using open data. I think the challenge there is figuring out what pieces of the puzzle are shareable, because this tends to be something that gets very institution specific and custom very quickly. But I do think that there are some underpinnings that we could do a better job of providing out of the box. I think there's at least one pull request that's sort of one of the foundational components of this. Let's see if I can. I think this is pull request number 2422, which is about pulling data from APIs and caching it. So it's not really specifically linked open data, but it's something that could be used in developing linked open data related functionality. And I know Mario's here. I can't remember where we left that last. Looks like maybe it's awaiting Ares review. I bet that the review request went in while he was out of town.
Oh dear. I'll see to it.
And I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, because I'm sure if we dig around in these pull requests, we'll find that everybody has something waiting for them somewhere that we've all lost track of. It's gotten a little out of hand over the past few months. Next on the list is displaying bibliographic relationships, some kind of visual navigation to support serendipity. As you may or may not already know, we have the whole channels section of VuFind, which was a thing that I built in an effort to support serendipity. I don't think it's gotten much use or adoption, but I think it still has some potential. I'm certainly open to other ideas as well. And some of this might also be able to leverage linked open data if we can figure out the right way to do that, to surface relationships that aren't necessarily built directly into the local index. Though, of course, that would also require us to index identifiers and URIs so that we could find all the necessary things.
I added the comment about maybe supporting record versions for with channels, so you could display those as a channel somehow.
Yeah, that's a thought. And maybe also surfacing in the channel view when a record you click on has multiple versions, like both directions.
Yeah.
And I see, as was mentioned yesterday, this idea of trying to update from Bootstrap 3 to 5, and then maybe making Bootstrap 3 a compatibility layer on top of that. I think if that's feasible, I'd love to see that happen. I think the challenge is that I don't think there's going to be a way to do that without touching a lot of templates because of the Bootstrap classes being hard-coded everywhere, which is where we then get into the refactoring to components thing. I guess maybe it's a chicken and egg problem. What do we do first? Do we keep refactoring, or do we create a port so that we can then highlight areas where doing the refactoring makes the port easier and reduces the amount of duplication?
I added this only because I know that the new theme will require so much effort, and creating all the components required is also a major task. So it's kind of a workaround for while we work on the new theme to avoid VuFind being seen as really obsolete, using a really old framework.
Right. Yeah, I definitely
So,
think
but
that
this is something that I've been playing about in my mind, that I really would like to try. So maybe someday when I have a chance, a couple of moments available, I will just see how it goes and try to search and replace everything that's easy to search and replace, and maybe provide a script that can do it automatically for a theme or something like that.
Yeah. If we could make a thing task that just builds the Bootstrap 5 theme, that's a much easier sell than having to maintain it. Whether that's
Indeed.
feasible, I don't know, but it's a thought.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I'll find out if I get to try it.
Have you investigated this at all, Chris? Do you have any thoughts on feasibility?
I remember looking into the Bootstrap 4, and I know that the theme's changed a lot since then, so maybe it's more feasible now. But a lot of the I think the problem was that some of the actual markdown changed, so it wasn't so much necessarily just a difference of classes, which could be remapped in some kind of compatibility layer. I think a compatibility layer is very feasible. It was that the actual like depth of like the forms and things like that changed in like the HTML. I'm not saying that's an impossible obstacle. It just seemed like it would be such a large breaking change at the time that it wasn't worth pursuing at the time.
I mean, maybe the way that we meet in the middle here is we identify the things that can't be automatically fixed, and that's what we prioritize converting to components first, because maybe we only need to build 2 or 3 components for tricky things, and then the rest is a string replace, and that gets us to something that will satisfy some requirements at least.
Also, another thing that I thought about is that we could have a Bootstrap 5 theme, but leave some sort of VuFind specific stuff into it so that the forms still work as they used to.
That's
But,
true too.
So it's not like a Bootstrap form; it's a VuFind form from that on.
Right.
The upgrade, the update, and then compatibility layer option appeals to me more in the long term, because having 2 themes means maintaining 2 themes.
Yeah, exactly.
This was the reason why I'm really hoping that the new theme that comes out will be framework agnostic, but able to be like wired into it. It is the existence of those hardwired classes that you utilize Bootstrap that make such an update and such, that makes such an update difficult. So I'm definitely, I do think an update to Bootstrap 5 would bring a lot of benefits. So I think the work is worthwhile, and I am happy to help where I can. But right now the focus for me would be on the new theme versus this kind of retrofit.
Sure, and I'm not in any way trying to derail that. So it's just another option.
No, it does
Maybe
seem like you're volunteering to try this out yourself. So
yeah, and I'm not expecting you to do anything about it.
Okay.
Except maybe if it turns out well, see how it looks. But apart from that, I'm not expecting any help.
Sure enough.
I guess another I think controversial or problematic aspect of all of this is what we do about CSS, because I don't think there's ever going to be an answer to that which makes everyone completely happy. And so we're going to have to figure out what answer makes the fewest people the least unhappy, or something like that. And I think Martin proposed just use plain CSS. I'm sort of interested to hear what motivated that, other than delivery size, which is certainly very understandable. But I know there's some preferences for less and some for Sass, and I don't know, what are deal breakers for people, and what might be directions where we could compromise?
Well, at least for Bootstrap 5, it's quite easy because it's like use Sass. So well, there is no real option there. And I think that in many cases, choosing either is going to cause some stir up, but people will adapt. So, but I don't think that the larger theme will, well, the plain CSS, while it's kind of a interesting idea, at least as long as proper nesting is not available everywhere, it creates so much more verbose rules that in many cases that's something I would consider downside compared to compiled ones.
And I imagine this may at least be a case where, in some cases, we might be able to reduce our reliance on some features of compiled CSS as native CSS becomes more robust, but getting completely away from it doesn't seem practical yet, is sort of the read I have. But things like CSS variables are interesting, and I wonder if we might be able to utilize those for some common customization situations instead of having to compile with variables or things like that. But I'm not an expert, so.
In order to support things like a high contrast theme or a dark mode, or or those kinds of accessibility and quality of life features that we've talked about, including from the beginning, using native CSS variables is going to be part of the equation either way. So the resulting, like even if we use Sass or less or any other precompiler, it's going to compile in a way that involves native CSS variables, because that just makes the rest of the theming much easier. It makes it much easier to set a native CSS variable that can then change based on different classes or things in a way that preprocessing can't quite handle, that because the CSS is the thing that has to adapt.
Those are not mutually exclusive, though.
Right.
You can use the variables and then make in SAS, for example, and make them available as CSS variables as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. They're not mutually exclusive, but the CSS variables are going to be part of it either way, which does make things a lot easier. To Aray's point, we are to both Damien and Aray's point, we are trying to reduce the amount of pain that we cause in unifying it. So there will obviously be short-term pain. People will adapt. I was hoping that post CSS could give the flexibility that we need, where people can add the features that they really want in their precompilers. But what I was hoping for there and wasn't able to find, and don't think it's worth time to personally develop, is that post CSS can't take existing less and parse it without using the existing less framework. And same thing for Sass. So there's no way to completely step off of these libraries without doing one or the other, and building both of those in the post CSS, I think will continue to aggravate the issue rather than reduce us down to one unified CSS framework. So this is definitely going to be a discussion, and yeah, we're going to unfortunately unifying is going to create work for people who aren't on the side that we end up unifying to. I've been watching, state of CSS and state of JavaScript very closely to see what kind of technologies we should adopt. Sass is one of the only technologies in the CSS space that continues to get more adopted and more highly rated as the years go on. Then again, state of CSS is only a 4-year-old survey, but the trend is pretty clear. So it seems like that might be the least painful option going forward. But to Damien's point, native CSS does much of the work that we're doing. We're really only using Sass, at least Sass and less, at least for the core dev team, for those variables and that nesting functionality and the importing functionality. And a lot of that can be handled with native CSS.
I think maybe sort of a practical goal to think about is that if we can easily provide a way that people can do simple things by just adding a CSS file without having to recompile things, like, here is how you change the color scheme, just set these CSS variables in a local CSS file.
Mm-hmm. That
might go a long way to making this more accessible to people of varying levels of comfort and CSS ability, etc.
The kind of worry from me about the native variables is that if we need a large set of kind of similar ones that we lighten or darken or so, we might end up with a really large number of variables.
Yeah.
And I think we have to maybe find a balanced compromise of, these are the 10 things that you can change without doing a lot of work that are going to make most people happy. And if you want to do more than that, you're going to have to compile your CSS, and here's how you can do that too.
trying to find, maybe they removed it, but an example of variable overload is a previous version of Bootstrap, where you could download a customized version where you could change all the colors, and there was no less than, I think, 60 variables there for everything from the borders of different components and backgrounds of different components. Each component, of which there were dozens, had multiple color points, and something simpler than that might be good to get people to a baseline that they like.
Right, right.
I think the problem becomes exaggerated when you have something like the button that changes to inverse colors when hovered over, and you need to have both those kind of, well, I don't know, or it changes just changes the shade or the border a little bit when it's active or hovered over, and
yeah, that's where a lot of my personal experimentation has been, is how to do that with a preprocessor. And I think I found a method that will result in relatively small CSS without having to duplicate every single class for every single media type, or every single is dark like body class. Finding a way to reduce that has been really important, of having like the hover border and things like that. But you're right, the darken and lighten pre-processing functionality for lesson Sass is very, very useful for that. I don't think CSS color functions are going to be released for a while yet.
So we just need to wait for a while and hope that the CSS support improves, or the CSS functionality improves for some aspects maybe, but we can do what we can, what's supported widely enough.
It would be nice to put whatever we end up on a path of self-deprecation, that as CSS catches up to all the functionalities that we desire from it, we use less and less of these tools.
And also, let's not name our next theme after some framework.
Especially a versioned number of a framework.
I mean, I understand why we did that, but I have some regrets.
The name that I've been using behind the scenes is just Progressive, which seems future-proof enough.
Right, right.
I'll vote for latest. It's
that won't become out of date and problematic.
Should probably add some of the other things that are not theme related that I want to do at some point.
Yeah, feel free to, this list is not locked in and static. If you have other ideas or other discussions that you want to have, please go ahead and step forward. We still have some time left in the this session, which I believe is going until the top of the hour. Yeah.
Yep. So 26 minutes left. So I guess there are a couple directions we could go in depending on what people are up for. One is we could look at the currently scheduled JIRA tickets for 9.0, determine who, if anyone, is willing to work on some of them, and whether any of them need to be reassigned to different versions. That's sort of a very nitty-gritty thing we could do. A higher level thing is, I still feel like it would be helpful to come up with a strategy for getting the theme work done, because right now we keep kind of falling off of it because other things come up, and then pull requests sit around for a long time. And I wonder if we need some kind of better method for distributing work and checking in on work and so forth. Certainly one thing that would help a lot would be having more people at the table for this. But even among those of us who have already been active, I think we need to do a better job of actually getting some of these things done instead of having them trail for so long. And I don't know if that involves devoting more of the community call to it. You know, one idea, like the last several community calls have lasted about 10 minutes because there hasn't been a whole lot to do. Do we make that more of a working meeting and we actually review open theme related things together, discuss actions, maybe even do some coding together? Would that be useful? Do we need a different meeting outside of the community call for this? Do we not want more meetings because we already all have too many meetings? I don't know. I'm literally just brainstorming aloud. But I just feel like it would be helpful to have more of a rhythm than we currently do. And that could also, of course, apply to things other than the theme, but the theme is just the thing where we have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of ideas, and we need to bring it to fruition.
What's this?
I just added a couple of potential things to work on at the bottom of other ideas based on questions I've received about our implementations. So those might be something that others might be interested in as well.
And I see a comment has just come in through the Q&A from Clemens Kynest, who is interested in being involved in a Bootstrap 5 theme in some way. So there's an offer of assistance if it is needed. I will make note of that.
I've moved it to a comment.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
To bring it all into one place.
I need to relocate. I'll be back soon.
All right.
It's very easy for these conversations to fall into development details. I'm very curious from people who are using VuFind that are not necessarily manipulating the code or don't feel as comfortable manipulating the code itself to get customizations done. What kind of features that you'd hope for to make things easier? One of the things that was brought up was some kind of interface, an admin interface that allowed for some of the customization. One of the places I thought could be done is if we want to have a place to change the colors, I think it'd be fairly easy to parse that file and make it an interface that then rewrites that file. And so that way we could have, an easy way to change the colors. That's also why I really want, I think the mix-ins is a really great way to support that. Is hopefully we can have some kind of gallery that you can see, oh, I like that homepage. Oh, I want to be able to put an image behind that like this. Oh, I like this layout of the record view better. And you can kind of pick and choose and easily puzzle things together into different mix-ins. really looking forward to blended search. All thumbs up from Clemens. Thank you. I believe we do have some. There is a project that has VuFind running in a Docker. I'm not up to date on it. Damien, do you have the details on this? Or
I think a lot of people are running VuFind in containers in different scenarios. I think the problem we've faced is that we haven't been able to come up with sort of a default standard Docker configuration that's easily shareable that works for everybody. So I think this wheel keeps getting reinvented. And a few years ago, we really did have kind of a project to try to come up with the one true Docker configuration. And there was even a pull request and Jira tickets and work went into it, but we never really got it to a place where it was usable for everybody. And that may just be the nature of it, because your Docker configuration depends on your use case in terms of how you want to scale things and how you want to break things down and so forth. But I would still definitely like to have something that's a better starting point than whatever we currently have in the wiki, which is not a whole lot.
is there a, speaking of the wiki, is there a wiki page on the Docker configuration?
There is.
Okay.
I will paste it into the document right here.
Oops, thank you.
Which links to a how-to guide that somebody shared 2 years ago and mentions the dead pull request 962. So, you know, these are foundations you could build from, but I'd love to offer something a little more robust.
Might be a little off topic on the future, but I found it very exciting to see the clean and lean theme from Martin and team. And I'm excited to see what that code looks like, because the Bootstrap 3 theme was developed before HTML5, and all those features have been slow to get in there. And I'm curious to see how everything was laid out in the markup, and I'm wondering how much of that can be used as the kind of scaffolding I was talking about for the new theme. So I'm not sure what the timing on sharing that is, and I'm not sure how the other boring details, like how ownership of that theme and keeping up to date will develop. But it's a very exciting contribution for me personally, I've been chomping at the bit to make a scaffolding and use new HTML5 tools. But like you saw in the diagram of the tree, like starting with the leaves and working the way to the trunk, it's a process that's taking a long time.
And I suspect that the standard challenge we'll run into there is the one we always run into, which is finding the right balance between moving forward and not breaking all our legacy stuff. Because if it drops a lot of functionality, which absolutely makes sense to do if you're not using it for, within an instance, how do we continue to support that functionality for others? The classic problem of the core product has to do everything for everyone. which then results in bloat, but you can't get rid of that bloat without losing things. And also the need to have tests for everything so that we know what things we break when we make changes.
It also seemed like a good step towards something that I developed, I think, a few years ago as part of when we had like a kind of a, what's it called? Like a dev jam. I forget what we called it at the end of VuFind Summit, where we'd kind of have like a code camp going on.
Yeah,
I
like
tried
hackathon.
Hackathon. Thank you. I tried to make like a text only super light theme because that year there was a presentation on having a local instance, and the focus on data usage and limited hard drive space made me think of that. And so, and also with Klaus's presentation about bringing academic resources to incarcerated students, kind of brought that image back to my mind of how far down can we bring VuFind to reduce its data usage on the actual like student end, and how can we reduce the amount of footprint that the project uses if limited hard drive space is a significant issue. So that was an exciting project for me. I just wanted to just express more thanks on that. I do hope that the new theme has enough modularity to it with the smaller templates that doing more radical customizations like that is more feasible going forward, without creating so much work on staying up to date for everybody's benefits. But it does sound very tricky.
I feel like we're definitely moving in the direction of more abstraction for more flexibility. But that's always a pendulum. We'll see what we regret after we've done it, but I definitely see the benefits of doing it from where I'm sitting. And I see we've just had a new bullet added. Someone mentions adding a reassign user data feature, so that you can transfer things like favorite lists if somebody's user ID changes. That does seem like a useful tool that it wouldn't hurt to have available to the community. Great, thank you. Yeah, I'd say pull request welcome on that. And dynamic info box. I guess that sounds interesting, but I'm not sure what that contains. But I'd love to learn more. Yes, I wonder if that would make sense to implement as a content block. Yeah, that all sounds good. And it's always also fine to submit a messy pull request just to start the conversation. I don't object to things being marked as draft and just to convey an idea. So whatever works best is welcome. So at this point, we have 10 minutes left. Is there anyone who has more to say but hasn't had a chance to say it yet? I haven't heard a whole lot of different voices today, and I hope we're not overlooking or excluding anyone. And certainly, if you have an idea after this is all over, it's not too late to reach out. Always open to feedback and ideas. But to circle back to the sort of management question, I wonder if it is worth reviving some amount of JIRA and pull request review on the community call, but in a different format. So, you know, in the old days before the newsletter, I would just give a boring summary of everything that had happened and no one would listen to me, and I don't blame them. But rather than doing that, maybe if every call we looked in JIRA at open tickets tagged for the next major release, and in GitHub at open pull requests on the next milestone, we could quickly talk about, okay, where is this? Who's doing the next step? Do we need help? And you know, just make sure that the logistics keep moving forward, and then things will not get stuck, and it will be easier also to announce opportunities for new people to get involved and help out, because we can talk about where we are and what needs to happen. I think that might have some potential. And I'll say, I've been spending a lot of time on the Fedora community calls as I've been working on our digital library project, and they do that sort of thing on a weekly basis. I think we're probably going to stay monthly for now, but I do see the value in that kind of a touch base.
To kind of expand on that, maybe at least in the next few community calls or dev calls, if community calls not the right place for it. Technology reviews, like talking about some of the different tools that might be used, like Sass, native CSS variables, post CSS. Like I could run a quick demo and show how that might work for VuFind, or we can go over tools that we might want to incorporate. That way everyone can get a good idea on how it would work and just help decide if it would be good for the project. And also like component updates. The next step of the work is definitely going to be breaking apart the interface into smaller pieces and then building those out fully. Starting probably with the components, the interactive things like menu buttons and drop-down menus and things like that. So maybe adding to the PR review demos or updates on how those components are coming along. That way we can kind of spread the work out and keep kind of a central collaboration kind of going.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And those technology reviews, if they're sort of structured as mini presentations, are another thing that we could record and share. So if people miss the call, they could still catch up.
Yeah, I'm happy to take on the work of doing a few of those. And I think that might be a good way to settle some of the nitty-gritty things just in time to wrap up the current leaves that are you know, that are holding things up, and get to structuring things more thoroughly.
I also like that a lot because I'm usually attending the community calls, and they're usually pretty short, as you say. And I think it would be very nice to get a better impression what else is happening and about all of the details, because yeah, it's just interesting to see what dependencies are going forward, and how exactly the themes are going forward. Maybe add some ideas to that, or yeah, I think that's a good thing.
And I guess this might also be a good time to just plug the community call generally, because maybe some people here aren't already familiar with it. But it takes place on the first Tuesday of every month at well, we tie it to 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so the GMT time shifts based on daylight savings, which is confusing. Maybe we should consider just pinning to GMT. That's maybe another issue we can include in our community call survey that we'll be sending around soon. But in any case, the next scheduled call will be October 4th at 1300 GMT. So if anyone would like to join that, please do, and I will try to get some of these new ideas onto the agenda. Certainly the ticket and pull request review would be a great thing to do, because I think there's a lot built up that we need to work through, and I don't think we're going to do that today. And if Chris has any initial tech review he'd like to propose, we could get that on there as well, or we could do it later as schedules permit. I know Chris has a lot on the plate, particularly in terms of presentation stuff in the short term.
I also have a lot of half-built demos from all my research that would probably work nicely as is as a technology review. So
oh, great.
I feel like it would make me feel double worthwhile of all the time I spent researching some of these nitty-gritty details.
Well, just let me know the agendas at your disposal.
Sounds good.
So we seem to be at the 3 minutes remaining phase. So any last minute thoughts or comments before we wrap up? And thanks again to everyone who took the time to join in. I think this has been a really good summit this year. I've enjoyed all the content, and I do feel some hope that we have some tangible actions to take to keep moving forward.
I also want to express my thanks to everyone for presenting and participating. I always find this conference to be very motivating. So I'm looking forward to what has shown to be a burst of activity and community collaboration over the next week, and that long tail keeps getting higher and higher. So I am looking forward to working with more of you and continuing to do far too much. Clemens in the Q&A said, thanks a lot for your effort. Hope you can get in contact soon. Thank you again so much, Clemens, for your, especially your feedback at the very end in the Google document and everything else that you've done.
It's an interesting experience to have a conversation with a Google document, but I think that worked surprisingly well.
It was a format that we got some good, oh, sorry.
Yeah, just saying, I think we may need to consider not using the webinar mode for the discussions in the future, maybe.
I think maybe people are just extra shy about getting promoted to the panel, but maybe I should just mass promote everyone, and then it becomes not an issue.
It seems that the limit is 1,000 panelists, so should be sufficient for a while.
I was having trouble yesterday where there was one person I kept trying to promote and they just would not promote. And so I thought maybe it was related to a limit, but maybe it was some other issue coming into play at that time. I didn't have any trouble today, so.
Okay.
So thanks again. I hope to see some of you at next month's community call. And in the meantime, you know where to find us on email and mailing lists and Slack, and just reach out however you like, and we'll keep things going.